Hello, lovely people. Thank you for having me, Adobe and Tim. Obviously, appreciate that immensely. My little topic as a edu influencer, as I made up a word to show to be silly with my wife last night. The topic is competition and challenge networks for teachers. So basically, we all like to think that we're reflective and that we're reflecting on things. In the research literature, the idea of reflexivity sort of extends reflection from something that you sort of just do into your journal that doesn't necessarily relate to the world to something a little bit broader, sort of self to world and world to self and back again. We did it as an edu reading back in Article 30, so that was probably end of 2021. And what we're talking about here is Dan Hasler has a book out, Habits of Leadership or something similar. It talks about bridges of support. So the idea being, where you want to get to and where you are right now, there's sort of, you need some support to get from there to there. And so for me, my personal reflection is basically the idea that I've been a teacher for, this is my 12th year now, and I've always valued teaching and sort of the wider community of teachers that surrounds teaching. And I always really enjoyed learning from other teachers and the idea, who is the one that teaches the teachers? And I've been inspired by those people that have done that and continue to do that in our world. And, maybe one day I will too. And in Simon Sinek's Three Worthy Rivals, he writes about a worthy rival. And I think us as teachers, it's not necessarily something that we're naturally confident with, because teaching is, of course, a caring profession. And we know that, everything we do more or less for our students. But I've found, for me personally, over the years, that that's not always enough for me, for whatever reason. And so I'm looking to kind of go above and beyond in many respects. And so to me, I do that because that then feeds back to what I do full time in my job. So if I spend, an hour writing about reflecting upon, writing research on teaching, education, the system, I find that returns to me threefold in the form of the way that I teach my students, the way that I interact with them. So to me, it's a nice virtuous cycle or circle, but that's just me. So I've always valued the idea of a worthy rival, and more it's become something that I actively seek out and look for. And within Dan Hasler's wonderful book, there was this great example which had real resonance with me, which is Anna Meares to the right and Victoria Pendleton to your left. And it's about essentially they're velodrome cyclists. So, they go very fast around a very narrow and steep wall. If you've ever been, standing alongside a velodrome, you know just how frightening those places can be. It's definitely a vertical drop from the top and a very sharp incline from there on down. So it brings together sort of a certain, firstly, thighs. You need big, strong thighs, as all male and female cyclists in that sport have, and you need sort of a certain risk-taking tendency, let's say, a bit of adrenaline junkie in the DNA, in the makeup. But from memory, Anna Meares has won 4 gold medals, and sort of her and Victoria Pendleton went back and forth on and off the track, and the idea being that Anna Meares would always use her as her worthy rival, so she would study her, which is something that's covered in Hajikuri, the Book of the Samurai, believe it or not, which is a very good book. If you've not read it, I strongly urge you to look at it. Too many people read, the Book of Five Rings or something much more mainstream, but Hajikuri is where it's at if you're looking for these kind of things, competition and challenge networks. And so Anna Meares would, sort of obsess over her rival opponent competition, and take really close notes on what she was doing, her strengths, where she was strongest in the race and so forth, so that she could then use that to reflect upon herself. So it's always a rival as a mirror in this case rather than anything else. And so you might think, well, what the hell's that got to do with teaching? And to me, it has a great deal. So for me personally, I always thought, I was teaching well in my class. I did a great job, I felt, at points, but then there were the awful days. And I thought, yeah, great, that's doing good, probably 6-7 years into my career. And then I heard about a man named Yelmer Evers, and he had just won, he'd become a top 50 finalist in the Global Teacher Prize. And I thought, okay, what's that? And also, who is this person? And he wrote Het Alternative, which is the alternative. And it was kind of sort of almost like a call to arms, something an activist would write about the idea that teachers should have more say over education, which, in an ideal world wouldn't be a revolutionary idea, but in our world, of course, it very much is, and that's wrong for a whole bunch of reasons. But anyway, reading his work, finding out what he did, and he was very much an early adopter of the flipped learning instructional video type of thing that I would then spend the rest of my teaching career up until now doing. And he had a lot of dramatically interesting ideas about approaching history and philosophy in class, and sort of a burgeoning view of a democratic approach to teaching. And obviously, if that sort of thing excites you, I suggest you seek out his work as well. But that kind of got me thinking. Prior to then, I didn't even know that there was kind of people like him who sort of had an impact beyond that classroom. I didn't know that was possible. I definitely didn't know what a Global Teacher Prize was. And then more recently, as I kind of, these things bubbled away in the background, I read all of his books and the series that spun out of it, which is the Flip the System series of books. I kept in mind, okay, well, this is interesting, and I'm really interested in that bigger picture thinking. Which at that stage of my career was sort of becoming something that was getting me up out of bed late at night to talk to random people on the internet. Not random people, very important people in the world of education from around the world. That brought me to yesterday, Seville Kumaran, who again was a top 10 finalist in the Global Teacher Prize from Australia, from Rudy Hill High School originally at that time. She's now in Canada plying her trade with another wonderful academic who I highly respect, but at that time we had sort of developed some sort of a connection, relationship, friendship, whatever you want to call it. Not relationship, that sounds a bit sus, but that kind of a connection where she was encouraging me to do the things that I was starting to do, and I was very much following the footsteps of her greatness in many respects. And then Deb Nedlicki, who was one of the 3 editors, including Cameron Patterson and John Andrews, who then did the Australian version of the Flip the System Australia book. So these sort of 3 people are kind of, I would say, the people that brought me from, just being happy teaching in my classroom, doing a bit of university study on the side, trying to develop my professionalism in that respect, to kind of a much broader view of what was possible, research, scholarship, leadership beyond your school. So obviously, I can't, having last year being named one of the top 50 finalists of the Global Teacher Prize, there's definitely some, that's definitely not something everyone should be trying to do. It was a very laborious process and involved, a whole range of steps and trials and tribulations and many other things. And there are some academics that have, raised questions about whether lifting up certain teachers challenges the broader understanding of the profession. And, I don't put that to one side. I think that's a very legitimate question, concern, idea to be thrown around, especially considering the thing we already know, the backbone, which is that teachers are working incredibly hard in, doing incredible hours, 40, 50 hours a week, really doing the hard yards, giving up weekends to do marking and all those sort of things. So it's definitely not something that you would want to see, across the whole system, but there is, for me personally, elements that are interesting and exciting. So, we all apply for jobs, and I've applied for way more and been accepted for far fewer. And I think I, at least personally, find some value in that application writing process. Some of it's just writing nonsense and filling in, I can write emails and write and type, believe it or not, really well. That standard criteria that we, at least in Victoria, all know about and think is a bit silly. And so on the left, I've got, a typical job interview question for a Victorian teacher job. And on the right-hand side is one for the Global Teacher Prize. And you can see one is a little bit more aspirational than the other. So I find both processes useful, and it's something that I've continued to try and do, writing applications to things that, are perhaps out of my league, just as a process of reflection and reflection, with an X, that is. So to do that, to do these things, this is a blend of, very personal for me, and kind of trying to draw a broader bow and a broader brush stroke as well. I think it's important to have a challenge network. So I only listed 3 people there, but I could tell you hundreds of other people who online or in person who I've tried to emulate, looked up to, and trying to, compete with in the most healthy way possible, because it all feeds back and contributes to the system that we're a part of and the students that we teach every day. So just food for thought, I hope. That's my reflection on challenge networks for teachers and how they might have